How do I even start this video? Okay, so Archie Sonic is something that I've heard a lot about over my relatively short time in the Sonic fandom. Lots of bad things, some good things, but more than anything, what I've been told is that Archie Sonic is kind of insane. It's also insanely long, like 500 plus issues worth of content over two separate continuities. And I wanted to see what all the fuss was about, so I decided to restart my read through of the comics, which had gotten like 50 issues in or so, and go ahead and cover the entire thing here on my channel. I would go ahead and recap what had happened in each issue and then give my thoughts like I do with the new issues of IDW. It was a solid plan, at least until I remembered something about the early issues of Archie Sonic. This comic is just so boring. Nothing at all happens in like the first 20 or something issues of the comic, but there are also a few ideas that are just important enough that you can't completely ignore them. It truly is the worst of both worlds. So here's the tentative game plan for this series. Eventually, I'm going to be going through Archie Sonic issue by issue, recapping the plot and giving my thoughts as we go. However, for this first episode, I'm only going to be covering the bits of the earliest issues that are actually kind of important, and then I'll give my thoughts over the entire thing at the end, because I'll be honest, you don't want a full recap of the first 17 issues of Archie Sonic. You may think you do, but you don't. Trust me, the more you see of what this comic was like, the more you'll be glad I skipped over most of it. So we'll be starting with issue 3's backup story, but before that, I'm going to give you just a really quick rundown of the status quo of the comic for context. The comic follows Sonic and the Freedom Fighters, Sally Acorn, Antoine, Rotor, and Tails as they fight back against Dr. Robotnik, who's the current dictator of the planet. Sally is the princess, and I think both of her parents are currently missing. They all hide out in Knothole, a secret village hidden underground somewhere in the Great Forest. Also, Robotnik has a series of roboticizers that can take any living thing and turn it into a robotic slave. That's at least enough that we can go ahead and get started. This story starts with Sonic running in to talk to Rotor and Sally. As you may have noticed, Rotor is called Boomer right now because of early comic weirdness. There are a lot of retcons to early Archie. I think Sally's whole design changes drastically around issue 12 or something. Anyway, Sally explains that Robotnik is taking over Southern Mobius and sends Rotor and Sonic to check it out. As they arrive, they see some of Robotnik's SWAT bots grabbing a hold of a local rabbit. They are tossing her into a portable roboticizer as Sonic tries to stop them, but since he's tied to Rotor for really stupid reasons, he can't act before the rabbit gets tossed in. Sonic takes out the SWAT bots and heads into the roboticizer truck thing and turns it off before it can fully finish roboticizing the rabbit. The rabbit is apparently passed out, and Rotor and Sonic decide to take her back to Knothole. We cut back to Rotor and Sonic explaining what has happened to Sally, and then the rabbit girl just suddenly jumps out of Rotor's hands and introduces herself as Bunny. Just to be clear, one panel ago she was clonked out, so I guess she was just faking the entire time to get a free ride from Sonic and Rotor. Honestly, kinda based. Bunny goes ahead and shows off her new powers, seemingly not actually that affected by the forcibly being transformed into a robot thing. They have a bit of a chat, and Antoine warns them that they're being attacked by a giant robot. So, you know, pretty typical Tuesday for these guys. Like, literally every story of this comic has them being attacked by one of Robotnik's giant robots. That happens all the time. Sonic and Bunny run off to fight the robot, but Sonic isn't specking into perception and nearly gets run over by it. He thanks Bunny for saving him and then runs off to fight it. However, his moves don't actually do that much damage, and the robot manages to hit him with a laser. We zoom in on the robot for a few panels and watch it get flipped around, only to reveal that Bunny had thrown him. Sonic uses the opportunity to defeat the robot, and we cut to them all complimenting Bunny on how cool she is. Overall, a really forgettable story. It's only really notable for introducing Bunny to the comic. I had to look this up because it's weird that Bunny is the only freedom fighter who doesn't show up in the first couple of issues, but she is from Sat AM like the rest of the crew. I have to imagine that she was introduced in a similar way there, which is why they did this whole origin story for her instead of just having her start off as a normal part of the cast. And honestly, it's really predictable how Bunny shows up and then immediately gets to spend the rest of the story showing off how cool and powerful she is. It's a very standard way of trying to get an audience behind a new character, and it's functional but not entertaining. Not to mention that, like, basically every other character in the comic so far, she has almost no personality at this point. Every character's personality in the early issues can be summed up in like 1 or 2 words. Sally is the responsible one. Antoine is pretentious and a coward. Tails is just annoying, really. Rotor is smart and like Sonic's friend, I guess. And Sonic is the cool kid. I feel like you can track linearly how comfortable the writers are writing these characters over the first like 20 or 30 issues of the Sonic comic. Like, there is a direct relationship between the issue number and how different every single one of these characters feel. The next story that I think we actually should talk about is from the next issue, titled Lizard of Odd. Oh yeah, by the way, every little one of these stories in early Archie is split into like these 4-page parts, and they all have these terrible pun names. Also, every one of these separate parts, which remember there's like 5 parts in an issue, they all start with a character saying Sonic the Hedgehog's name. And I hate all of this and cannot wait for the comic to drop this gimmick. The story opens up with Robotnik saying that he's waiting for his SWAT bots to bring him the new creature to roboticize. He ends up finding out that all they brought him was a tiny salamander and gets really upset. He sends the SWAT bots to be dismantled and tosses the salamander into the roboticizer anyway. Except then a buzz bomber turns the size knob too high and it comes out all huge. You know, a part of me wonders why he doesn't just make every one of his robots huge if it's that easy, but I seriously don't want to think too much about the logic of these early issues. Anyway, the salamander is huge now, and it introduces itself as the Universe Salamander, which is at least a B tier pun, so I'll let it pass. We cut to Sonic, Rotor, and Sally watching what I think are security cameras where they see the Universe Salamander going on a rampage. Sonic runs off to fight it and sees Robotnik running away from it like a little bitch. Sonic attacks it only to literally get bored. The part ends with everyone looking on in horror as the Universe Salamander walks away, presumably having eaten Sonic. Now, this is done as if it's a cliffhanger, which is really weird because the next part of this story starts in literally the same issue. Like, it's not a cliffhanger if you can just turn the page and see what happens, right? I don't know, maybe this was only one way of getting access to these stories or something, and in one context this kind of made sense, but as like a full issue of a comic, this entire setup is very weird. Anyway, the next part begins with the Universe Salamander feeling a bit under the weather. Sonic is dashing around inside of his mouth, causing it to throw up and for Sonic to escape. Sonic runs away as the Universe Salamander attacks him, and then Sonic explains that he stowed away 7 Chaos Emeralds and 50 rings, which allows him to access the Special Zone at a Stargate. After collecting another 50 rings in the Special Zone, he goes supersonic for the very first time in Archie canon. He faces the Universe Salamander again and literally goes through him, which I think is supposed to be a nod to the super form's invincibility, but that's also just not how it works. Maybe it's supposed to be a pun since the salamander just said you'll have to get through me before it, but why am I thinking this hard about this? Whatever, Supersonic runs back to Nullhole and asks to borrow a machine from Rotor. The machine turns out to be a shrink ray, which they just have on hand, and he uses it to shrink the Universe Salamander and steps on him. Then we cut to them all celebrating or something. So yeah, that was Supersonic's first appearance in Archie. It's very underwhelming. The main thing that really sticks out to me about it is how literally they interpreted a lot of the game mechanics here. That, if I remember correctly, is going to be a defining feature of Archie Sonic versus IDW going forward. Like, the rings and Chaos Emeralds and stuff are just things that you can find. There are also like a lot more Chaos Emeralds, so it's not just 7, I'm pretty sure, which is very strange. But yeah, they like use the rings to do shit constantly. This has always been really weird to me. I know that there's a weird ban on having rings be like a thing within the IDW lore now, which is a weird decision. Personally, I always thought the rings were currency within Sonic. I thought that was like how they bought stuff, you know? I do think this is one of the only time the star posts get mentioned. I think from here on out, they have them go super just by getting a lot of rings or the Chaos Emeralds or whatever. The next story with an element that's worth keeping in mind doesn't come around until issue 11. The story opens with the Freedom Fighters, Sans Sonic, looking onto a factory that Robotnik has made that's just pumping out pollution. Sally decides to get in contact with Sonic, who's apparently like really far away fighting, I think that one's Scratch? I don't know the difference between Scratch and Grounder, I'm sorry. After Sally tells Sonic to get his butt over there, Sonic says that he needs to take a shortcut. He runs through the secret zone towards the comic Interstate. This is a thing that I remember getting brought up a few times into the future. I think they actually keep this idea. I don't think it's super well fleshed out at this point, but the cosmic Interstate is basically like this place between dimensions that you can use to go wherever the fuck you want, basically. Sonic misses his exit and has to go on a detour. You may think that's me being glib about it, but like that's how it's described. Like they really go in on the highway puns with this thing. Eventually, Sonic gets off the cosmic highway and finds himself somewhere. He's basically lost. Sonic runs around to try and find someone to give him some sort of directions and runs into a veterinary clinic. Inside, he finds Dr. Robotnik treating a little rabbit. Pretty much instantly, Robotnik and all of the little animals descend upon Sonic with a vengeance. Sonic is able to juice it and gets away, but since he's not watching where he's going, he ends up running into someone. Specifically, he runs into Sonic with a biker jacket. The next part opens with the two Sonics running in a circle and arguing with each other. Sonic trips the Sonic with the jacket and asks what's going on. After Sonic says that he got here through the cosmic Interstate, the Sonic in a jacket explains that Sonic is in a parallel universe, one where right and wrong have effectively flipped. Sonic in a jacket explains that Sonic has found himself in the reverse universe, and that here the freedom fighters fight against freedom. Meanwhile, Dr. Robotnik is a nice guy that tries to help animals and all that stuff. Sonic decides that he needs to get out of here, but the other Sonic trips him when he tries to run away. We cut back to the freedom fighters, who are basically useless without Sonic there. I think this panel is literally just here to remind the audience of what the stakes are. Like, they don't even say anything all that meaningful. We cut back to Sonic and Evil Sonic, and they decide to race or I'm not really sure what they're doing. They're just running around the planet a lot. Eventually, Sonic runs into Robotnik's clinic and makes a face at them. As soon as Evil Sonic runs in behind him, all the little animals fight against him and trap him in a little cage. If it were that easy to defeat this guy, I really don't know how this version of Robotnik hasn't done it yet, to be honest. Anyway, after that, the Sonic from our universe explains to this universe's Robotnik kind of what's happening and then juices it to the cosmic highway again. When Sonic returns, he has a vacuum type thingy I think that Robotnik was supposed to have given him from the other universe that he uses to suck up all of the pollution. I say I think because I don't see anywhere where they explicitly say that this happened, and there's like 2 panels of Sonic talking to Robotnik from the other universe, so I don't know where this came from. Anyway, after Sonic sucks up all the slop, Robotnik's base explodes for some reason. Then Sally kisses Sonic on the cheek because shipping. Yeah, okay, that was a really weird one. Going through it again, there are a lot of little details that just don't make any sense. Like, I didn't think about it when I first read it, but actually paying more attention to what was happening for this video made me realize how many random things just happen without any explanation. I find it really funny that Sonic with a leather jacket was just really cool and upfront about being the evil version. Like, you'd think he'd say, actually, I'm the good guy, and you're the one with the twisted sense of morality, or whatever, or have any real explanation for why he does what he does, but no, he's just straight up honest about being evil. I mean, I guess they write Robotnik like that too, so I shouldn't be surprised, but it is funny to me. Yeah, this story isn't very interesting on its own, but it is our first exposure, or I think our first exposure to a lot of ideas that the comic would develop from here on out. Sonic in a leather jacket, the cosmic highway, and the multiple universe angle is something that's gonna come up several times in the near future. The next story we need to take a look at starts all the way in issue 13. It opens with Sonic and Tails flying around in a biplane towards a floating island. They ruminate on what exactly could be keeping it afloat while we see a spiked glove attached to a red arm shaking in anger at them. The biplane they're flying gets hit with a literal unwelcome mat, and Tails manages to catch Sonic before he falls to his death. Their biplane crashes and Sonic and Tails discuss exactly what's going on. They're attacked by a robot and they hop into a nearby source of water to try and escape. Then we get a series of panels of them basically just going through Hydrocity Zone. Sonic seems to drown, and we cut to Sonic and Tails both tied up. Sonic asks the $64,000 question, which is a bit I actually quite like, and we see Knuckles. Okay, I'll talk a bit more about what he's actually saying here, but like, why is he stanced up like that? Why does he look like such a fucking nerd? Anyway, Knuckles introduces himself as the last Echidna and the guardian of the Chaos Emerald, not the Master Emerald, because continuity was weird. We cut to Robotnik and Snively watching all of this unfold on their big TV screen. The pair drop that they're playing Knuckles for a fool and setting him up against Sonic and Tails. Anyway, we cut back to the three talking to each other, and Knuckles says that he's gonna give them 10 minutes to get off the island before he comes after them. That seems like a bit of a weird thing for him to do in this situation, but I honestly couldn't be fucked. Anyway, Knuckles' unexpected mercy makes Robotnik really angry with him, and he decides to take matters into his own hands and steal the Chaos Emerald while he has the chance. The three are running through the jungle, and Knuckles takes a back path to get ahead of them. However, when he does, he notices that someone messed with one of his shortcuts. Since Sonic and Tails get to where he is just after that, Knuckles is able to realize that Robotnik is messing with him. We cut to Robotnik about to make his escape when Sonic zips by and yoinks the Chaos Emerald away from him. Sonic and Knuckles decide to team up and take out Robotnik together. After that, Sonic just repairs their biplane, which I guess he can do, and they take off to go back to Knothole. And yeah, that was Knuckles' first appearance in the Archie comics. Overall, I actually like this story a fair bit more than a lot of the stuff that surrounded it. It had a few jokes that I actually kind of liked, and it felt like there was an actual sense of plot and progression to what was going on. Most of the time, the stories around this era can be described as stuff happens and they make jokes and then Sonic wins. It's really not amazing, but if every single story in these issues was on this level and had a actual plot going on, I probably wouldn't be skipping over literally all of it. And that is every single story throughout the first 17-ish issues of Archie that I think you actually need to read to understand like the plot of the series going forward. I really cannot stress how little happens in any of these issues outside of the few things that I showed to you. 90% of what I was showing you was just, this is the first time a character shows up. Very little time is spent in early Archie exploring characters or themes beyond the absolute surface level. Everything in this comic is surface level, really, and that's not necessarily a problem. It's a gag comic. A ton of pages of each issue are literally one-panel stories that are just there for a single joke, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if the comic had stayed that way forever, I wouldn't really be interested in it, but that doesn't make it bad. That's just a difference in priorities, I suppose. No, the problem is that this is not funny in the slightest, and getting through this comic is just such a chore as a result. The more plot-heavy stuff coming up isn't even necessarily good a lot of the time, but I have an easier time reading it just because it gives me something to latch onto, even if that something is pretty negative. And trust me, there will be a lot of negatives in the upcoming issues. But that's where I'm gonna stop for this episode. I hope to have a video covering the next few issues of Archie Sonic in more depth out soon-ish. And we'll be getting to the plot of the comic soon enough. I hope that at least some of you guys are excited to go on this journey with me. Quick shout out to all my members: Elric111, Agent B7, Bokabara, Sonic Storm, Mega Sonic Bros, Joseph Florian, Fate Testarossa, GB484, and Devin Higginbottham. I really hope I pronounced those last few right.